The ideas expressed in City Club forums are those of the speakers and not of the City Club of Cleveland, IdeaStream Public Media, or their sponsors. Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland, where we are devoted to creating conversations of consequence that help democracy thrive. It's Thursday, April 17th. I am Nigaman Sridhar, member of the City Club Board of Directors and Provost at Cleveland State University. Today's forum comes at a critical time in our state's budget process, as well as a divisive time in our country's political climate. But it cannot be denied that our speaker today, State Senator Jerry Cirino, has emerged as one of the most powerful members of the Ohio legislature. He represents Lake County and communities in the east and southeast sides of Cuyahoga County and serves as vice chair of the Higher Education Committee in the Ohio Senate. Indeed, higher ed is perhaps where the senator is most well known, as probably evidenced by the dozens of demonstrators outside the City Club this morning in opposition to Senate Bill 1. But Senate Bill 1 is not the only thing that the senators worked on in higher education. In my capacity as a higher ed leader, I've also had the opportunity to work with the senator on a number of other initiatives, including supporting computer science education, which is a topic that's close to my own heart. SB 1, also known as the Enact Advance Ohio Education Act, quickly moved through the State House and was signed into law late March. Senator Cirino also chairs the Finance Committee, where he leads the Senate's draft of the state's capital and operating budgets and other additional expenditures for the state. This includes funding for our libraries, schools, public transportation, and more. Right now, the legislature is in the middle of the state budget process. With threats at the federal level to key funding streams, it is no surprise that the leadership from many Northeast Ohio institutions are in our audience today. I just learned something about the senator just a minute before I got up here, which is probably more important than many of the things that I just said. I just learned that he's been married to his wife, Donna, who's here also, for 52 years, and they have 39 grandchildren. If you have a question for the senator, you can text it to 330-541-5794, and the City Club staff will try to work it into the Q&A program, a portion of the program. Now, members and friends of the City Club of Cleveland, Ohio State Senator Jerry Cirino.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Back up
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Let's move this down here. It's such a great crowd here. I thank you all for coming. I hope you won't be disappointed. We have a lot of things to share, and hopefully the questions afterwards will allow you to express yourselves in different ways, and I'll try my best to answer your questions. It is such a privilege to be at the City Club. I was handed a book that to make a notation in the signature of all the speakers who come to the City Club, which is a historical document. And I was thinking, what do I write here, right? That I would like to be remembered by. And I have to tell you, it was very simple for me to figure out the answer to that question. And the answer was, I grew up in Little Italy here in Cleveland, not too far from here. Went to high school in Little Italy at Holy Rosary School and St. Joe's High School, also in Cleveland. So I am a native Clevelander, proud native Clevelander for almost 74 years now. And for me to be invited to speak at the City Club of Cleveland, I've been here many times as a guest or a participant, but never had the opportunity to speak. It is such a privilege, and that is what I noted in the book, that, again, as the City Club is a forum, so there's lots of different opinions, lots of different positions that are discussed and debated, but what's really important is that it is a forum where people can get together, even disagree, and still have productive conversations and meaningful relationships. So it's just a pleasure and an honor for me to be here. I'd also like to, before I start, recognize some of my colleagues in the legislature that are here. If they would just please briefly rise so we can recognize them. Senator Christina Rogner, who is also running for state treasurer. Senator Jane Timken, a name we all know well. Senator Al Catrona, right here from Youngstown. Representative Mike Davila from the House. Representative Nick Santucci from Warren. Representative Bill Romer from Hudson. Representative Kelly Dieter from Lorain. And Representative Heidi Workman. Heidi's from Portage County. So these are outstanding members of the legislature representing Greater Cleveland or Northeast Ohio. And it really is an absolute privilege to work with these people and all of our colleagues who are not here as well. They are working with me and with Tom Patton, who couldn't be here today, the other senator from this area, on behalf of the people of Ohio in general, but more specifically on behalf of the communities and the people of Northeast Ohio. So I was primarily asked to talk about Senate Bill 1, which I will, which is no longer a bill, and it's been signed by the governor, as the provost mentioned, and will become law on June 27th, a date that I have in my memory. But before we get to that, I was asked to also talk a little bit about the current budget process, which is of interest to many people in this room. So just from a process standpoint, the House passed their bill last week, their omnibus bill. They did their work, and my congratulations to the members of the House that are here. You not only did your work, which was a lot of work, but you did it early. You finished ahead of schedule, which gives the Senate a little bit more time. In times past, there have been some time crunches where we got the bill late and we had very little time to do what we have to do. So the Senate really appreciates your working to a schedule like that. Their bill is several hundred pages long, and as was mentioned, it covers funding and appropriations for all kinds of programs and departments in the state of Ohio. It's pretty massive. The General Revenue Fund is $92 billion for the 2-year biennium, and if you add into that all of the money that comes to us from D.C., for which we are guardians, if you will, it's basically a $200 billion budget that we are responsible for. That's why we like to take our time and go through it carefully. Just to give you a couple breakdowns here of where the money goes from a spending standpoint, K through 12 education, a little over $11 billion. Medicaid, our share, $22 billion. Higher education, $2.9 billion. Corrections, $2.5 billion. And general government, $2.7 billion. And many, many more line items that accounts for hundreds of pages. From a revenue standpoint, where does this money that we spend come from? Well, the two biggest areas are sales and use tax, certainly, which is $14 billion that we bring in. Federal grants that we get, another $14 billion. It just about matches our sales and use tax. And of course, the personal income tax, which brings in about $10 billion. That's where the money comes from that we are expending in the areas that I talked about briefly a minute ago. So what are the key issues that we're looking at in the budget right now? Because we just started in the Senate last week. We just got the bill from the House last week, and we've been working in anticipation of some of the things that we thought the House was going to do. So we're not literally starting from scratch, but until we knew the actual appropriations in their bill, we couldn't do exactly everything we wanted to do in terms of preparation. But we're now starting to go through the entire list of categories that I mentioned and hundreds of others to make sure that we are funding the right things at the right time in the right manner, and that we're also looking at policy issues that will be attached to many of those appropriations. But the key issues we're looking at is, of course, K through 12 funding. Anybody here from any school systems? Raise your hand. Okay, we've been getting lots of questions already from various organizations, school systems, groups, and individual superintendents. That's going to be a very big area for us to be looking at. Higher education funding, the state share of instruction, or as we call SSI, which is a very large amount of money that goes to the 14 public universities and the 22 community colleges that we have in the state of Ohio, and many other programs that they respectively have. There's also a lot of talk about financial support for economic development / sports teams. Anybody paying attention to that one? By the way, I had a meeting with Jimmy Haslam not too long ago, and he tried to start the conversation about the project, and I said, time out. That's a sports thing, you know. And I said, Jimmy, forget about the stadium. I just want to go to the Super Bowl before I die. And he said, I can't make any promises. I said, well, then neither can I. So we'll see where that one goes. We're looking at, putting some guardrails around recreational marijuana, which I've said this publicly, and I'll say it again today, and some of you may disagree with me, but when we approved that, it was one of the dumbest things the people of the state of Ohio has ever done. We are going to pay a price through mental health crises we already have that we can't even anticipate. That's what it's going to cost the people of the state of Ohio. But the people have spoken. Our job is to look at revised code and do what we can to put some brackets around it and how we're going to spend the taxes that will result from that. We're also looking at property taxes. Everybody, of course, is interested in that. With the valuations increasing the way they have, we've got to take a look at producing some kind of tax relief the best we can. And, of course, overall economic development. So the next step in the budget is in our hands in the Senate, and we are going to do our very best to come to a good conclusion in time so that when we sit down in a room for 8 or 10 days with the House and the governor's representatives, we will hammer out a budget by the end of June that will make sense for the people of Ohio. So and I'll just say the final thing on the budget is that the Senate has not determined final positions on most things at this point. We are doing research, we're having conversations, we're going to have hearings. We'll see where things go. We have not made up our minds about many things at all at this point. Okay, let's talk about Senate Bill 1. I think the people out there, and again, I agree, they have every right to be there. They don't have a right to misspell my name. So I saw 2 of them that got it wrong. So why do we have to do this in the first place? Well, let's talk about some stats. 2024 Gallup poll revealed that confidence in higher education in the United States has significantly declined. Only about 1/3 of Americans actually express a high level of confidence in our colleges and universities. That same survey found that 68% of Americans believe higher education is heading in the wrong direction. And there is, of course, as you would expect, a partisan divide on this issue as well. Only 20% of Republicans have high confidence in our institutions of higher education. Even the Democrats have declined from 68% to 56%. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a crisis of confidence. And if we ignore it, we do so at our own peril. A considerable factor in this lack of confidence, as we all know, and as I found out in my 4 years now working on higher education, is the predominance, and you can deny it if you wish, but the predominance of left-leaning faculty, which has skewed things on our campuses. Higher Education Research Institute at UCLA, not exactly a bastion of conservative thinking, came up with a couple of stats that I found very interesting. In the 1990s, the ratio of liberal to conservative faculty was 2-to-1. In the early 2010s, the ratio is 5-to-1. And I think if we were to to see that now, we would see that it's probably close to, some numbers I've seen, is about 95% liberal to conservative. And that is, as you'll see when I address this in a minute, it's not contributory to solving the problem. It is the problem. It's one of the problems that we have to deal with here. So unless you're perhaps a Democrat representative in the House, Higher Education Committee, or a member of the Ohio Senate minority who denies that there is a liberal bias, perhaps some of these stats will change your mind. Excuse me. Now, there are many other factors impacting higher education, which also begs the need to make some changes. The demographics are undeniable and almost unstoppable, right? We have a 14% slide in the number of high school graduates in the United States. And Ohio is about average with that. Okay, so there are fewer customers, if you will, coming to any post-secondary educational environment. And that's a problem, and there's nothing that we can do about it. I mean, my wife and I have 9 kids and 39 grandchildren. We've done our part. But even we can't stop the demographics from going in the direction that they're going in. Add to this unemployment of graduates or underemployment of graduates who are not able to find work in their field of study. That's a problem. And then, of course, we have the massive changes in workforce demands. In-demand workforce jobs are a huge challenge for us right now in the state of Ohio. We aren't going to be able to attract companies to come here or companies that are already here to grow unless we have the workers for them to use or to be able to tap into. So if all of that doesn't make a case for radical change in higher education here in Ohio, I don't know what would. Unless, perhaps, you are the Association of University Professors. I think some of them are outside. Or the ACLU, who believe that the status quo is absolutely just fine. That's a crazy position for them to take. This is where Senate Bill 1 comes into play. And I will tell you, just to remind you that it was its predecessor bill, which was Senate Bill 83 in the last General Assembly. We didn't pass it in the House, so we had to start all over again. So Senate Bill 1 and 83 are virtually the same except for a few things. So my work in this area stems from a view that I'm now seeing an intersection between education and economic development as we've never seen before. Without the very best educational system, we will not have properly trained workforce, and without a trained workforce, we will not have a robust economy here in Ohio. And of course, without a robust economy, we will not be able to provide health care, special education, child care, and other social services for those in Ohio who need our assistance. That safety net costs money, and if we don't have a robust economy that is growing, we are one day going to run out of money to be able to fund those necessary safety nets. That's why I'm so confused by opponents of this bill and other critics who are constantly pushing for more services out there to provide to the people of Ohio, but don't seem to understand that there's a connection between economic development, economic growth, and our ability to continue providing those services. Those two are not disconnected. Okay, they are inexorably tied together. If our universities and community colleges are fixated on DEI and separating students by race and hiring professors who follow a monolithic liberal agenda, we are not preparing our students to learn how to analyze, research, and come to their own conclusions. In short, if that were to continue, we would be selling our students very short. Critics have said some pretty unprofessional, inaccurate, and I think disingenuous things about Senate Bill 1 and me. That's okay, I don't mind that. Criticism is fine. That's the lifeblood of our democracy, right? But you have to be accurate. You don't have a right to make up the truth. Here's some of the things that the opponents of Senate Bill 1 have said. It will destroy higher education in Ohio. Well, the governor signed a bill a couple of weeks ago, and to my knowledge, higher education is still pretty well intact in the state of Ohio. They've said it will send a chill against free speech. The legislature is overreaching, telling the universities how to run themselves until they need us to write a big check every 2 years. That students and faculty will leave Ohio in droves. Certainly for some of them, that would be okay. Some of the ones who came to testify, I will help them pack. Now, but we're not going to see that. Some of my Democrat colleagues in the House and Senate on floor speeches, which you can look at on the archives of ohiosenate.gov and ohiohouse.gov, were really interesting. Let me share a couple, and these are attributable, so I'm not making them up. Representative Sean Brennan, friend of mine, guy I know, he's from Parma out here. Quote, SB 1 is the ultimate in micromanagement. Requiring a professor to post every resource they use online at the beginning of the term is unwise. It will stifle creativity, erode professionalism, and lead to a cadre of automatons who will fear trying new things. Representative Desiree Times from Dayton, quote, it is a threat to our First Amendment rights. It is racist. How is it even possible for a bill that calls for color blindness to be racist? I don't understand that one. Representative Beryl Piccolantonio, quote, it's reckless, its sweeping impact it will have by attacking working people, by muzzling free speech, by trampling student rights, by big government's overreach, and potentially destroying our economy. Senate Bill 1 would destroy our economy. Representative Karen Brownlee, quote, if Senate Bill 1 passes, it will pave the way to take workers' rights away across all sectors. One of my favorite ones, Representative Cecil Thomas, quote, Senate Bill 1 doesn't build bridges, it burns them. I don't know what that means. Senator Bill DeMora from Cincinnati, this bill is cow manure. It's quite an intellectual response. Senator Catherine Ingram, quote, the problem is that it's just like discussing the Holocaust. When you don't remember something, the fear is that you repeat it. Again, I don't know what that means exactly. These comments were made on floor speeches. My colleagues here had to sit through them and deal with them, and everybody has a right to say whatever they want, certainly. But I have to tell you, I do want to point out, during the hearings that we had, and particularly the House had the last few hearings, we had students come in protesting the bill in faculty, and we had students coming in faculty to some who are here today at table number 9, who were proponents of the bill. And I have to tell you, I think we had 8 or 9 students from Miami University and a couple from one of the other universities, maybe OU. And I was so impressed with these students that came in. Again, students can come in and be opponents and they can be proponents. They have a right. But these students from Miami and OU came in, they testified in front of the Higher Ed Committee in the House. They were wearing jackets, ties, they were well-spoken. Some of you were on that committee. They handled their questions professionally, and even when others were on the committee were trying to trip them up, they were unflappable. These are the students that we want. These are the students, regardless of where they are in the political spectrum, they were professional, well-spoken, well-mannered, and they had an argument, and they attempted to make their argument here. And I think that was just so impressive to me. I wanted to make sure that I pointed that out to you here. So let's just go over Senate Bill 1 a little bit here. Here's the thrust of this bill and how I believe it will positively reform higher education in Ohio. First of all, the critics have said this restricts speech. This bill creates more opportunities for speech. You can't create more speech and restrict speech at the same time. It doesn't work. So this bill creates more opportunities for more subjects to be talked about. It just has to be balanced, right? Not monolithic in thought. So we got to have more discussion and more debate. What is wrong with that? It promotes a requirement for policy to be made by the Board of Trustees that they are committed to diversity of thought and that it be the actual policy in writing of the institution. It includes better training, calls for better training and informed trustees to deal with the important strategic issues that higher ed is facing. It assures that students come first, that there is no interruption in instruction. And here's what I love. No topics are forbidden from being discussed in the classroom. Contrary to what the opponents have said time and time again for 2 years now, that we're restricting speech and that there are certain things that are off limits. Absolutely wrong. Any topic can be brought up. We say in the bill, or excuse me, in the law, that it has to be balanced. Any topic can be discussed. We are not restricting academic freedom as has been proposed. Institutional neutrality, similar to what the Chicago principles are, that have been longstanding, and that means that the university themselves, the community college themselves, should not take a public position on subjects. They need to be neutral. That's their job, especially ones that are state agencies, which our public universities are. We're talking about an environment of continuous improvement by faculty and staff, greater authority for presidents and trustees to deal with resource allocation. So if they don't have enough faculty in computer science, but they've got too many in liberal arts. I love liberal arts. This is not a knock on liberal arts. But they have to be able to move resources around to meet the growing and quickly growing changing needs of our employers, and without having to go through long, multi-year negotiations with faculty senates and unions, which is very unproductive. Less indoctrination by virtue of all of the free speech. We've asked in the bill to the chancellor to come back with ideas for how we can have more 3-year bachelor's degrees. Okay, you want to reduce student debt? What's so magic about 4 years? Okay, it's been that way for hundreds of years. We could probably do a little bit better than that, not including College Credit Plus, which can also help you get there as well. And no more wasted money on DEI, which is divisive. Senator Michelle Reynolds, our African-American senator in the Senate, had a great quote the other day on the floor. She said that, quote, DEI has become a system that sorts us. And what I have said many times before, that we want opportunity for everybody in the state. Anybody to pick whatever post-secondary option of education they want, we want to help facilitate that and make it as available as possible and make it as inexpensive as possible. But some of our universities have been spending tens of millions of dollars on infrastructure for DEI, which has become institutional discrimination. You can't solve discrimination by having other discrimination. The best way to eliminate discrimination is to eliminate discrimination. Those were the words of Chief Justice John Roberts a year ago last June. The law professors, I got that right? Thank you. That's what we have to be doing. We don't want to rule anybody out. We want to make education available to everybody. It's in our best interest, and our students deserve that here. So when reviewing this new law, ask yourselves and others the following questions. Why would you oppose periodic performance reviews for faculty? Why would you oppose post-tenure reviews? I mean, tenure is basically a job for life, right? We want to make sure that there is an environment of continuous improvement. And I'm not against tenure. I think it's wonderful, particularly in our research institutions. But we need to make sure that nobody just coasts along for the last 10 or 15 or 20 years of their career. We want continuous improvement. What's wrong with more trustee training? Trustees have embraced this. Many of them have called me and met with me, and they welcome this and they love it. Why should a third party interrupt or threaten to interrupt a valid contract between the student and the university? I am not anti-union. I am not anti-labor. I dealt in my private sector companies, dealt with the steel workers in Buffalo. I know how to coexist with unions, okay? But what I do not countenance at all is students having their instruction interrupted in the middle of a semester because a faculty union wants a better dental plan, or they want more sabbatical time, or whatever they might want. They have a right to negotiate for those things, but not using the students as pawns. When a student signs up for a semester and pays for it, that's a contract between them and the university. Nothing should interrupt that. Nothing at all. This is not a labor issue. This is a student rights issue. Is more imbalanced speech a bad thing? Why not have syllabus transparency? What are they hiding? So let me kind of wrap up the Senate Bill 1 discussion here. I've stuck with this legislation for over 2 years because I believe that we need to step out of the paradigm of the past and embrace the necessary changes to position Ohio well into the future. We are now in the execution stage of this bill. In anticipation of it becoming law on June 27th, I've spoken with, I think, just about every president, many of the provosts of the community colleges and the universities. They're all anticipating that, they've been anticipating for quite a while, and are beginning to make moves and make changes to be in compliance with Senate Bill 1, which I'm delighted to have them be doing. We're also going to be, I can tell you with my finance chair hat on, that when we look at higher education appropriations, we're going to have appropriations tied to compliance with Senate Bill 1. We're not kidding around. This law will not be ignored. It will be welcomed, and it will be implemented at our universities and community colleges, and maybe even some of our private colleges are thinking about adopting some of the components of that. So we're going to make sure that all the work we've done doesn't go to waste because it's being ignored. We're going to make sure it happens, and nothing speaks like money. Along with the establishment of our 5 new civic centers, Miami University, Ohio State, right here at Cleveland State, Toledo, and Wright State, Ohio has now, along with Senate Bill 1, has now jumped right on top of the states for reforming higher education. You know, Ohio is very typically like 33rd, 34th, 35th, as we look at other states in most areas. We are going to be, once we execute this bill, we're going to be number 1 in higher education reform. And isn't that a nice change for all of us here in Ohio as taxpayers? So, we had a great compliment paid to us the other day. Tom Young, who is my counterpart, is Christina's counterpart now in the House Higher Ed Committee, who worked with me very, very solidly for 2 years on this bill. One of our friends told us that they had a meeting with Gordon Gee, former Ohio State president and now West Virginia president, who said to him, and neither Tom or I have met Gordon Gee, but apparently Gordon Gee's comment was, using both of our names, you guys have saved higher education in the state of Ohio. And I'm not concerned about that as a compliment, which is certainly, makes you feel good. But what's really important is that this is somebody who knows higher education very, very well. And for him to say something like that about people he doesn't even know means he's studied the issues, he's looked at the bill, and he realizes that had we not stepped in with Senate Bill 1, we would be on a collision course with catastrophe in higher education. And the economic aspects of that, what would happen after that, are things that we wouldn't want to think about even in terms of their impact on our economy and our impact on our ability to pay attention to our safety net here. So my final comment, I know I'm getting the hook here. So I'm a lifelong Clevelander, as I mentioned before, and I'm really excited about where Cleveland, Northeast Ohio is right now. I've been talking in my role to business owners, developers, other politicians of both parties. I'm seeing a level of cooperation and interest in taking Cleveland to the next step, Northeast Ohio to the next step, that I don't think I've ever seen before. We've had a lot of fits and starts here in Cleveland, right? 1 week, we're going to do this with Burke Airport, then it goes away. We're going to do this in the Flats, it goes away. How many ups and downs have we had to live through here? We have the Greater Cleveland Growth Partnership, which I think is a good organization to help facilitate that stuff. And we have a good lakefront vision. I hope we can get them implemented. the largest tax increment financing package that Cleveland has ever done or thought about doing. And the politicians are engaging, the community and business owners in ways I think that we've never really seen before. One thing we're missing here in Cleveland, and some of you may not like this, but I just can't help but say it. One thing we're missing is an objective newspaper to join us in making the community better. We need them to report the news, not advocate for their left-leaning positions. They need to provide critical analysis as opposed to vitriolic personal attacks from most opinion writers and the editorial board. Their insinuations and vicious branding of the Republican legislators and leaders is not only unfair, but it is unwarranted. It makes it more difficult for my legislative colleagues and I representing this area to be able to get things for Greater Cleveland in Northeast Ohio when we Republicans statewide are vilified for every move we make by this newspaper. So when the criticism from the likes of Suddes and Quinn become personally directed, as many of them have been, and they attempt to sway the public opinion to believing that the legislative branch is up to no good all the time, in the face of hard work and time that we all put into these jobs, I think a bit more respect and objectivity from the plain dealer would be appropriate. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Senator. We're about to begin our audience Q&A. For our live stream audience, I am Nigamant Sridhar, member of the City Club Board of Directors and Provost at Cleveland State University. Today, we are joined by Senator Jerry Cirino. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, students. I know there are some CSU students in the room, as well as those joining via our live stream at cityclub.org. We will no doubt have many questions for the Senator this afternoon. A reminder to please keep your questions short, to the point, and actually a question so we can get to as many questions as possible. If you'd like to text a question for the Senator, please text it to 330-541-5794, and the City Club staff will try to work it into the program. May we have the first question, please?
Hello. Our first question is a text question. It says, how would the Senate prioritize workforce supports for young families in the budget, like child care and the child tax credit?
So we are looking at a lot of things in child care and publicly supported child care. We have been for a couple of years now. We realize that it's a big challenge for us because we have a lot of people who are keeping out of the workforce. Our workforce participation rate in Ohio is 67%. Okay, that means there's a lot of people on the sidelines for any number of reasons. Lack of child care is perhaps one of the biggest ones probably. So we're looking at doing some things that we can do in publicly funded child care. We're also looking at, we have some bills that we have in mind to provide incentives for employers to offer more either stipends or actually on-site child care to allow people to get back to participating in the workforce. So we realize all of those issues are very important, and I think we're addressing them in one fashion or another.
Good afternoon. My name is Merle Johnson. I recently served 8 years, term limited, on the State Board of Education, on which there are 19 members, 11 elected, and 8 appointed by the governor. In the budget, it's been proposed that the number be dropped to 5 members and that those members be appointed instead of elected, which would really eliminate the voices of a lot of people in Ohio. So my question to you is, do you support having 5 appointed members on the State Board of Education instead of 5 elected? And if you do support it, why?
Thank you for the question. I do support it, and here's why. Because we now have the Department of Workforce and Education, or Education and Workforce, and we still have the remnants of what was the statewide school board, which were all elected the designated territories that these school board members were responsible for were huge. People didn't know who their school board member was. They had no staff support. It was very, very ineffective, which is why we established the Department of Education and Workforce in the first place here. The scope of responsibilities for the current remaining ones and the 5 that will be appointed has been limited significantly because the real work is going to be done by the Department of Education and Workforce. Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Malia Lewis. I am the president of the Cleveland Heights University Heights School Board, currently in my 8th year serving my community. Senator Cirino, your Senate district includes some very wealthy school districts and some very poor school districts with very different abilities to raise money through local levies. How will you ensure that the 90% of Ohio's children who attend public school will receive the fair school funding they deserve? For example, 11 school districts in your Senate district will be shortchanged over $35 million by the House Omnibus Bill compared to what they would receive through a fully implemented fair school funding plan. Similarly, my school district of CHUH will be shortchanged over $6.6 million.
Thank you for the question. So I had a lengthy conversation with the superintendent in Kirtland, actually, this morning, who was basically asking the same question. And so, first of all, I would just from a procedural standpoint, I will tell you that don't start going ballistic by the virtue of the House bill, because that's just sort of the beginning here. The Senate has not determined its views yet on the funding of schools and what other parameters might go along with that. So it's still a work in progress, and it will be through the 3rd week of June, most likely, okay, until we get things settled. Look, we have some big issues here because property taxes and school funding are inexorably related to each other, right? I ask constituents all the time, do you know what percentage of your property taxes go to your schools? How many people here know that? Raise your hand if you know it. Okay, you're a pretty informed group of people, right? And most of you have no idea. You don't know. It's upwards of 70% depending on where you live. 70% of your property taxes, based on the millage that you have in your wherever you live, goes to our public schools, okay? If you add to that the fact that property values have now gone up because of inflation, and which is the result of overspending and printing money, then that is a deadly combination. That means that people are getting shocked when they open their envelopes from their state treasurer or their county treasurer. So we're still working through what the formula is going to be. We are looking at all the time, we look at whatever proposals we are considering, we look at the spreadsheet as to which systems are going to be affected, which ones are not going to be, which ones might be neutral, and we do try to use that as a guide. But there's concern about, well, we don't want to have to offer levies out there. Well, you know, maybe you're offering too many levies. You know, do you know what the 20 mil floor is that allows school systems to levy against the values of your property without ever going to a vote? That's a problem. I personally have a big problem with that. We want to be democratic. Everything should be up for a vote. No emergency levies, no this, no that. Let's put everything on the ballot and let the community decide how they want to support their schools. Yes?
Hi, my name's Abby Marshall. I'm a government and politics reporter for IdeaStream Public Media right next door. We're Cleveland's NPR station. When you talk about fair and balanced news, we provide that at the station. And I was just curious because I've tried to reach out to you for stories, as have some of my colleagues, and we have not gotten any sort of response. What is the best way to reach you when we are working on stories about things that concern you?
Okay, well, I'm surprised by that because I've actually been in the studio here downstairs in the past, and I've done a number of NPR interviews over the telephone. But you know, my office is reachable. And my two, I want to introduce Kaylee and Richard from my office. Stand up, guys. They are both recent graduates, and I do mean recent, of the University of Dayton. And so my office has now become Daytonian. But they are fantastic. And if you call my office asking a question or wanting to get some help with the Board of Liquor Control, whatever you might need, that's who you're going to talk to, is those two folks. So I'm delighted and privileged to have them on my staff. Yes, anybody else?
Here.
Yes, sorry.
Good afternoon. I'm Annette Tucker Sutherland, former school board member for my community. My question is, what evidence do you think establishes a fact, or is everything a controversial belief or policy? And the second part to that question would be, what can an instructor do if between 80 and 97% of actively publishing climate scientists agree that human activities are the primary cause of global warming, but a student who is not a scientist wants to argue that global warming is not caused by human activity? Does the instructor allow 20% of time for the anti-argument? What do you think is balanced?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for that question. I honestly really mean that, because there has been so much misunderstanding on that issue, on the general issue of controversial topics. In the bill, in the law, we now include a list, not comprehensive, but a list of controversial topics. And we did that. It's not meant to be exhaustive, because there will be new controversial topics in the future, and some of the ones we currently have will go away. It's a guideline, and that was really defined so that universities understood, generally speaking, what kinds of things they should not take a public position on, not to limit what gets talked about in the classroom. I want to give you this one example. I must do this. I get asked all the time, well, what about Holocaust deniers? How will that be handled by a professor? Now, I've been asked that question by reps in the House many times. And I will tell you, I think it's quite simple. First of all, I've never met a Holocaust denier. I've been to 3 European prison camps, and I'm a student of history. I have no doubt myself that it happened the way it's been historically reported. But I use the example of, so if you're a professor in political science and you're in a classroom and the student raises their hand and says, I don't think the Holocaust happened, or I don't think it happened to the extent that it's been reported. What is the professor to do? Well, I guess the professor has several options. First option is, if he's big enough, he can pick up the student and throw him out the door, right? Probably not the best classroom decorum. He could engage along with other students, basically giving this student a hard time and shouting him down and calling him names and that sort of thing. That wouldn't be the best way to go. Or he could take a few minutes, not a ton of time, and he could explain the preponderance of evidence that is out there that supports the view that it did happen, and it was a terrible thing in humanity to have ever happened. And maybe convince the student, maybe convince him to do some research. Maybe he won't change his mind. But you don't have to spend the whole class doing that. That's how it should happen. My Jewish friends tell me that in the Jewish belief system, that education is the first and foremost argument against an issue. Okay, and that's what should be used in our universities, whether it's climate change or any subject, the Holocaust, whatever. That, I believe, is how things should be happened, so that student, as dumb as it is for him to propose that, he has a right to be dumb. We see that every day. Okay, and that's how controversial subjects should be addressed. Yes.
Yes, I'm George Dent, Emeritus Professor of Law at Case Western Reserve. Senator, in addition to SB 1, you sponsored the law that created Centers for Civics, Culture, and Society at 5 universities. You mentioned it in your talk very briefly. Can you talk a little more about what those centers are intended to accomplish, how the faculties at the host law schools have responded to their creation, and how they're coming along?
Great, thank you for the question. So we established in the last operating budget 2 years ago, it will be 2 years in June, we established 5 centers at the schools I mentioned. And these are independent of the university. They are on site in university buildings, but they have a director and a board that hires the director. They ultimately report to the president of the university, but they operate independently. We have directors now in place at all 5 of them. They are starting to hire faculty. Ohio State is the furthest along, and they're obviously the largest one. Lee Strang is the new director. He moved from Toledo University to Ohio State, and he's hiring faculty, and it's about civics education. And because one of the things in the bill that I neglected to mention earlier is that there's a requirement now that for any bachelor's degree, you have to have 3 hours of civics and history in your coursework, or you don't get your bachelor's degree, okay? Who would criticize that? Believe me, they have, okay? That's something that we need to have more of. And so, you know, a lot of these courses in these 5 centers are going to be used to help satisfy those requirements at the universities. But the key thing is that they're going to be independent, okay? You know, we've had a couple of situations already where faculty senates at a couple of the universities have tried to think, either they didn't read the legislation or they read it and wanted to ignore it, that they had some say-so in the hiring of professors for these centers. They don't. They have 0 input. They can offer opinions, but we've used the Attorney General's office to make it clear to some of them who didn't quite get it that they cannot interfere with the hiring. So these are going to be great. The Ohio State list of faculty is outstanding. You would know a lot of these people, I think. And it's going to be great for Ohio. We're the only state that has more than 2 of these civic centers. We have 5. That's why we've jumped up to the top in higher education in the U.S. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for being here, Senator. My name's Melanie. I'm an attorney and business owner here in Cleveland, and I'm proud to serve on the Board of Trustees of the Cleveland Public Library. It was a pleasure to be with you last week at Ohio Library Day. You shared a lovely story about memories at the Alta House Library. So my question has 2 parts. Can you share with the audience more about your childhood memories from the Alta House Library? And given your dedication to libraries, can you highlight how you will support Governor DeWine's budget request to keep the Ohio Public Library Fund and support the governor's proposal of 1.75% of the general revenue fund for Ohio Public Libraries? You're in an important position as chair of the Senate Finance Committee for that.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Great to see you again. It was, I think you had like 300 people, didn't you? 300 librarians in the atrium last week, and I had an opportunity to speak with them for 10 or 15 minutes. I don't know if we have time for this, but I'll tell you my childhood story that she was referring to. Growing up in Little Italy, we had the Alta House Library. It was behind the Alta House, the public library. And I think I was 10 or 11. And my mother, bless her soul, pushed me to read all the time. And she pushed me to read above my grade level, okay, which sometimes I didn't like, but in retrospect, it was a good thing. And so she said, I signed you up for the summer reading program at the Alta House Library. I said, oh, that's wonderful. What do I have to do? Well, you have to read so many books, and you know we didn't have stickers back then, but you got a star or something. But here's the hitch. She said, oh, by the way, after you read a book, before you get credit for it, you have to sit down next to the desk of Mrs. Schneck, who seemed like she was about 80 years old to me at the time. She was probably in her 30s. But I was 10. So, and you had to give a book report of the book you read that you wanted to get credit for. And I thought, wow, okay, this is something new I didn't think about. So I did it, and it in anticipation of that first one, you know, I didn't want to be embarrassed by her. She was she was a sweet lady, but she looked like intimidating, okay? And so you had to prepare. You know, first you had to really read the book. There were no cliff notes for these books. You had to really prepare for it. You had to understand. She asked questions not just to fact check you, that make sure you really read the book. She would ask you about interpretations. Well, what was this character thinking about, you know, et cetera. And, you know, and you couldn't BS this woman, okay? I think she read every book in that whole library. And, you know, it was a great lifelong lesson for me that about preparing for things, about doing your homework, of how to extemporaneously speak, how to answer questions like we're having today, and how not to be put off by people questioning you. And if it weren't for my mother pushing me to do that, I never would have had that opportunity. In terms of the budget, as I said before, we're still formulating what we are going to do with the budget. The library piece is about $1 billion that we give to the library group in Ohio. It's a lot of money. We have a fiscal responsibility to make sure that when we appropriate, that the services are being delivered in the best way possible. And we're looking at that for the libraries. I have a great affinity to libraries, certainly. And there you are. Sorry, I was looking for you. And we'll do our very best to make sure that we make sure libraries can continue to serve the people of Ohio. Okay.
In Medina last year, we passed a levy, and with the elimination of the Fair School Funding Plan and a proposed 30% carryover cap, nearly the entire levy could be wiped out in 2026. Senator Cirino, do you share my concerns about undermining local control and going against Ohio's long tradition of respecting local governance and voter intent, especially for a one-time tax credit?
Yeah, I think local control is the concept of subsidiarity, right? I think the more of that, the better. And we certainly respect home rule as best we can. We love to work with our mayors. I got a couple mayors sitting in the back there. They know that we try to help. We try not to hinder as much as possible. With that 30%, for those of you who have been following it, the 30%, above 30% year over year carryover, there is an exception, and the House can correct me if I'm wrong, that if there's capital needs, that some of those dollars can be moved over to anticipate capital needs. And that wasn't real clear. The superintendent I spoke with this morning didn't know that. So he was really worried about, hey, we got buildings to do, and is this going to wipe out our balance? And I told him no, and I pointed out to him the section to look at. So it won't, if your levy was for construction, maintenance kinds of things, then it won't be an issue here. What we're trying to do is return some. Taxpayers are screaming for immediate property tax relief, okay? But they don't know where their property taxes go. They're just screaming about that. We have to listen to them too, and we have to pay attention to what are the solutions that we might be able to offer that will give them some relief. At the same time, we don't want to hurt the schools. Schools are obviously very important to us. So we're going to try to strike the right balance. And what we end up with in the Senate, I don't know yet because we haven't formulated that. And how it will compare to the House, we don't know that either. But we will eventually reconcile and do our very best to make sure that we don't harm school systems. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Jerry Cirino, for joining us at the City Club. Forums like this one are made possible thanks to the generous support from individuals like you. You can learn more about how to become a guardian of free speech at cityclub.org. Today's forum is the Bernice Kerrigan Smith Forum on Education, made possible thanks to the members of her family in honor of her distinguished teaching career, which started in Licking County and eventually led her to teaching at Cleveland Public Schools during and after World War II. We'd like to thank her family for their continued support. The City Club would also like to welcome guests at tables hosted by the Center for Community Solutions, the Cleveland Public Library Foundation, Cleveland State University, Cuyahoga Community College, Cuyahoga County Public Library, the Deaconess Foundation, Friends of Bernice Kerrigan Smith, Friends of Jerry Cirino, Greater Cleveland Partnership, Greater Cleveland RTA, and Macaulay and Company. The City Club is off this Friday, but will return on Friday, April 25th for the 2025 Charles R. C. Annual Forum on Reentry in partnership with Lutheran Metropolitan Ministries. Local leadership will discuss how public policy can shape Ohio's future through a second chance workforce. Tickets are available for this and other forums at cityclub.org. And that brings us to the end of today's forum. Thank you once again, Senator Cirino. I am Nigaman Sridhar, and this forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
The ideas expressed in City Club forums are those of the speakers and not of the City Club of Cleveland, IdeaStream Public Media, or their sponsors. Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.